What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's transfer tips for Game Week 11. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's teams and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button, rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. Let's get into it. So let's start with the second most informed Norwegian number 9 in the Premier League, and that is, of course, Erling Haaland, who's had over 200,000 transfers out ahead of Brighton away in Game Week 11 and has just one goal in the last 5 games. And at 15.3 million, that is starting to feel a little bit expensive. Now, if you didn't make the switch to Salah last week, is there any more reason to do it this week? I would say not really. All the same pros and cons are exactly the same this week as they were last week. And I think with Haaland, we're going to continue to see a trend of people transferring him out until he gets a brace or hat-trick to put people's minds at ease. We know he's fully capable of doing that. But until it happens again, I think people are going to continue to want to get rid of him, especially while the likes of Salah are doing well. But in terms of whether you should make the switch, it's exactly the same discussion as it was last week. Are you happy to go without him for captaincy? Are you prepared to do it for the long term? You shouldn't be selling hard and then getting him straight back in. And are you happy with the different captaincy options you've got? And will your squad be better overall? Because if it won't be, and you don't have the transfers to shift those funds around straight away, it might not be worth it. Like, Haaland is fully capable of getting 1, 2 or 3 goals against Brighton away. Spurs at home in Game Week 12 is not a bad fixture. Remember that Romero picked up an injury the last game for Spurs. We don't yet know how long he might be out for. Van der Ven is out until after the international break, most likely. Doesn't mean he'll be available straight away. At home, that's not a bad fixture for Haaland. Liverpool away is tough, but obviously Salah plays Man City the same week. And then from 14 onwards, the fixtures get a little bit better, starting with Forest at home, Palace away, and Man United at home. So he's not all of a sudden a terrible option, but selling him to Salah does free up a lot of money that can be used elsewhere. It doesn't mean that money will be useful, right? And I've got to use my own team as an example. One of the reasons that I sold Haaland to Salah was to free up the money so I could keep Gabriel, Raya, and Trent. Well, once again, they got me no points last week. Probably won't get me many points this week because I suspect that Villa will score and Chelsea almost certainly will. You know, Game Week 12, it might be a little bit better. But if those kind of players aren't pulling their weight for their price and other people have got Haaland and then cheaper defenders like, I don't know, you could go for a Chelsea defender, Nuri, Aina obviously doing really well at Forest at the moment, Moreno got an assist as well, then those kind of squads keep up. It's not just about Salah or Haaland, it's also about the other players you've got in your team as well. So I made the switch last week because I was happy to... Well, one, I was at a pretty low rank, so it was nice to go a bit differential. But I think you can get away without Haaland captain over the next few weeks. I'm not going to go through all that again because I've done it so many times over the last couple of weeks. But basically, any game week where you're thinking about captaining Haaland, there's an alternative in Salah, Saka or Palmer. And Salah and Palmer in particular rotate really nicely. So if you're prepared to go against it, great. But anyone that's thinking about selling him that hasn't done it yet, you're going to have the same thoughts that everyone did last week as well. What if this is the week that he scores a brace or a hat-trick? When people were selling him last week, my deadline stream was full of people saying you're going to regret it. We didn't regret it in 10. We might regret it in 11. You just don't know. And let's not kid ourselves that Haaland is now not a great option. He will continue to get returns going forward. Also, by the way, depending on who you bought last week, the difference in points might not have been that massive. Like for me, I basically had Salah captain and Raul Jimenez, which was 20 points. If I'd kept Haaland, I would have had Rodgers 9 and Haaland captain for 4 points, 13 points. So I've gained 7 points by making that move. It's not massive. It's only one game week. I might lose those points next week if Haaland scores a hat-trick. And don't get me wrong, I'd love to get an additional 7 points every single week. That's pretty big. But after 1 week, we can't say that this has been a massive success, especially when those other players I've kept in my squad are not doing that well. So I think if you want to captain Haaland, obviously I'm fine with it because I've just done it myself. And I do like the squad that you can get overall. And I do think over the next few weeks that will pay off. But it ain't a guarantee. And every week it's going to be horrible watching Man City without Haaland because you know he's going to get chances. And also, by the way, he had lots of chances over the last couple of weeks. Like overall, his expected goals versus goals is pretty fair, I would say, right? He scored 11 from 9.6 xg. But it's just one of those situations where all the returns came at the start and now it's evening out a little bit. But honestly, if you told me right now that Haaland was going to get 3 xg like he has for Southampton and Bournemouth over the next 2 games, I'd be really worried about what he's going to do to my FPL rank. So I can't really say any more than that. There are benefits to selling him. It could be painful. And if you're someone with higher team value, you might not need to get rid. You might be able to get your Haaland, Saka, Palmer if that's the setup you're looking for, and have the rest of the squad looking exactly how you want. Make the move or don't. I think it's quite a close call, despite what some people might say. I can't really offer any more advice than that. It's scary to sell him, but as I said last week, the first week's always the worst. If you get through that okay, then suddenly it doesn't feel so bad. Even though I know he can still massively damage my overall rank, because I got away with it in the first week, I'm kind of okay with now sticking to that for the next 5, 6, 7 weeks, however long it might be. So I guess I've got to talk about Chris Wood next, or to give him his proper name, Chris the Inevitable Wood, because every game week it's inevitable that he's going to score, and this guy is absolutely killing me. I can't believe how badly the swing of points has gone between him and Calvert-Lewin, and I get it, right, Calvert-Lewin not a great finisher, completely understand that maybe he wasn't the best pick, but the amount of goals that Chris Wood has scored is just kind of crazy at this point. So how many is it? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in 5 game weeks. Calvert-Lewin's got 0. And obviously Chris Wood owners not only massively ahead on points, but also they've got those price rises as well. But anyway, enough about my misery. Is Chris Wood still a good option to bring in? I feel like with Nottingham Forest that the boat has been missed a little bit. Now, I spoke about Aina yesterday, and I don't see a huge amount of clean sheets coming up. I will say for an attacker, the fixture run looks a little bit better. Like Newcastle at home this week, Chris Wood is fully capable of scoring in that game. Arsenal away, I will die on the hill that is a tough fixture, despite the lack of clean sheets that Arsenal have had. Their defensive numbers have been really good, and I would not be surprised if Arsenal get a clean sheet in that game. Maybe I'm just hoping for that because I've got double Arsenal defence and I don't have Chris Wood, but I think that is a really difficult fixture still. Ipswich at home, great. City away, tough, but looks a lot less tough than it would have done if Rodri was still fit. At the moment, teams are finding a way to hurt Man City, and maybe Pep will fix that by game week 14. And I wouldn't sit here and say it's an easy fixture. It is definitely not, but it wouldn't be completely out of the question for Wood to score in that. Man United away, you don't really know what kind of team they're going to be at that point because Amorim would have had a few games in charge. And then Villa at home is not that bad for Chris Wood. And then after that, once you get past the Villa at home game, it's Brentford away. They're shipping a lot of goals. I know Fulham only scored 2 last night, but they created a lot of chances. Spurs at home, you always fancy a goal. Everton away, Wolves away, not that bad. So although I think there's a lack of clean sheets there for Forest, I don't think that fixture run is as bad for Chris Wood. He's starting every single game. The minutes are pretty good. We know he's on penalties ahead of Gibbs White. I can't bring him in. I just don't think I can go there because I look at the Arsenal and City games in the next 4 game weeks. It doesn't feel right to bring him in. But at the same time, if someone said to me, I'm just going to buy Chris Wood instead of Cunha or Raul Jimenez or a Brighton forward or Visser, I just don't think I could strongly argue against it. The guy is in incredible form. And I've said this for the last 2 game weeks. He is overperforming, right? I think even Chris Wood owners would probably accept that. He's on 0.42 expected goals per 90, but his actual goals per 90 are 0.89. At some point, that level of returns will decline. But these things are not as easy to say, well, it's going to decline, that's going to start right now. It could be that he goes on this hot streak for another 10, 15 game weeks, and it's towards the end of the season that he starts to slow down a bit. So despite me thinking that he's overperforming, I also think he's a really good FPL pick when they've got good fixtures. I personally just won't be able to bring him in. I'd rather spend the extra 0.1 million and go for Cunha, who's just got great fixtures all the way through up until game week 17, and also has Southampton at home right in front of him instead of Newcastle at home. Chris Wood's goal threat, by the way, is better than Cunha. Chris Wood definitely on penalties, not necessarily the case with Cunha either, but I think I would just take that fixture run that Wolves have got. I think if you wanted to buy Wood ahead of Visser or something like that around him, like I said, I think it's perfectly fine. I'm going to be talking about him again next week after another goal, aren't I? I just can't believe how many he scored. 8 goals in the first 10 game weeks. If you've owned him the whole way or even got him in recently, fair play. You deserve the points. He was a good pick. I'm very jealous. I still ain't going to bring him in. So Ollie Watkins getting a few transfers out this week, over 125,000 so far. And I think there's a few things contributing to that. One, he's got Liverpool away this week, which is not a great fixture on paper. Two, there's a lot of cheaper forwards doing really well at the moment. So we've just spoken about Chris Wood. Isak has scored against Chelsea. Arsenal has a good fixture run ahead of him. Cunha is really popular this week. I think a lot of people want to pump that money into midfield instead. And also, I've not checked Watkins' recent returns. Yeah, he's blanked in the last 2 games against Bournemouth at home and Spurs away. And actually, it's only 1 return in the last 4. So that is probably also a big reason why people are looking to get rid. I've not owned Watkins all season. Maybe that's why I'm ranked 2 million. And I've not really considered him at all either. And it's not that he's a bad option, right? He's absolutely not. He's got 7 attacking returns in the first 10 game weeks. And he's the kind of player that could go and get another 7 returns in the next 10 game weeks. I've always felt that he just feels a little bit expensive when you put into context what everyone else costs, basically. Now, it's a little bit different now I don't have Haaland. It might be a bit easier to fit Watkins in. But I think those premium midfielders are looking so good that you've got to sacrifice somewhere. And having like Watkins and Palmer and Saka and Salah, and again, I think those 3 premium midfielders are what most people are looking to build towards. And having Watkins, it just becomes very tricky. And something has to give. And for a lot of people right now, it's the £9 million forward that might not even be on penalties. It'd be nice for Villa to get a penalty with all the key contenders on the pitch so we know once and for all who's going to take them. Like it could be Tielemans, it could even be McGinn. And Watkins doesn't have the greatest record on penalties. So that's why I've never really considered him. In terms of his own stats, 0.56 non-penalty expected goals per 90, really good. He often plays 80 to 90 minutes every single week. He doesn't get injured that often. He's probably going to play most games over Christmas. I guess one thing to quickly say on that, maybe with Duran there, Unai Emery might be more likely to rest Watkins than he would have been in previous seasons. Potentially. I'm not saying it's a massive chance of that happening, but it's a possibility, right? So, for example, and we're going to be talking about this quite a lot over the next few weeks, there's a midweek game week coming up, which is game week 14. So for Villa, it's Chelsea away on Sunday, Brentford at home on Wednesday, and then Southampton at home on Saturday. So will Ollie Watkins start all 3 of those games? I think there's a good chance he does. Maybe Duran gets Brentford at home or Southampton at home to give Ollie Watkins a little bit of a rest. So I look at the next few fixtures after Liverpool, and if he starts them all, I think he'll return really well. Palace at home is nothing to be worried about. Neither's Brentford at home. Chelsea away a little bit tougher, but Villa will get chances. And then Southampton at home in 15 is great. It's just that price point, the 9 million. I don't know. If you've gone without Salah and Haaland, then he's very easy to fit in. But if you want one of those, I just don't think Watkins really makes the cut. You've got to make too many sacrifices elsewhere. I mean, to be fair, I've got Trent and probably buying Cunha. I could have Watkins in a 4.5 instead. But actually, longer term, I'm not sure that is better. So I think if you're selling Watkins before Liverpool away based on 1 goal in the last 4 and you want to spend that money elsewhere, I think it's fine to sell him right now. But if you're already an owner, I think 3 home games and 4 afterwards, if he starts them all, there are decent returns coming. So unless you're desperate for the money, you could keep hold of him. But I wouldn't be buying him right now. So let's move on to a midfielder and talk about Brennan Johnson next, who currently costs 6.7 million, has had just over 75,000 transfers in this week. I really like Brennan Johnson as an FPL pick moving forward, to the point where if I had 7 million or less to spend and didn't have to take anything else into account, like future moves and stuff like that, I don't think there's anyone I would rather buy right now, even though he's got Man City away in game week 12. And it's possible that I'm forgetting someone, and I'll have a look at other midfielders in a second, but I think he looks like a great pick. At that price, he's pretty cheap. His underlying numbers are good, 0.52 expected goals per 90. The minutes are great right now. Spurs in general so far this season have been the best attacking team. They've generated the most expected goals. Ipswich at home is an amazing fixture. City away is tough, right? And I'm not going to veer away from that, but I think if you're ever going to play City and get chances, it's right now, although let's keep in mind that Game Week 12 is after the international break. But you know what I mean, right? Spurs will cause problems for Man City. Fulham at home is fine. Spurs' record at home is good. Bournemouth away is a little bit tougher, and then you've got Chelsea at home in 15. But I still don't mind those fixtures for such a good attacking team. And then you get the Southampton game in Game Week 16. Now, a few people have said to me that Spurs' away record is not that great, right? And they're a different team at home than they are away. And maybe that is true, right? Most teams are stronger at home anyway, but I get the point. But I look at the away games they've had so far. Leicester, for anyone that watched that game, you probably wondered how Spurs didn't score more goals. That was the general narrative after the game. How did Spurs not score more? Newcastle away, I'm going to be honest, I can't really remember that game at all, right? So I'll have to skip over that one. Man United, they absolutely smashed them. And they were smashing Man United before the red card, by the way. Brighton away, okay, they lost, but they were cruising in the first half and scored 2 goals. And Palace away was a bit rubbish. So if we're saying they're a bad away team, you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 fixtures to base that on. And in 3 of those fixtures, Leicester, Man United and Brighton, they scored 6 goals. And against Leicester, probably should have scored more. I don't remember the Newcastle game. Let me know in the comments how bad they were in that one. Palace away, I think it's fine. And when you look at the away games it is coming up, City away, I'm not saying Spurs are a bogey team for Man City, but they are the kind of team that will cause them problems. Southampton away is absolutely fine. And then Bournemouth away might be a bit tough. I think overall the fixtures are not as bad as they look on paper. And Brennan Johnson's a really good price. I just think he's a really good pick. And he's had 4 90 minutes in a row. And I know I said I've talked Brennan Johnson up as an option the last few weeks. He's blanked 2 of the last 3, but that can happen, right? He's still got chances in those games, especially the West Ham one. It's 4 90 minutes in a row. His main competition is Odegaard, who's injured. Kulusevski seems to be primarily being used centrally. There's not really anyone to take Brennan Johnson's place right now. Richarlison, even if he's fit, plays left or central. I think he just looks great. And if I go to midfielders, just quickly, because there's probably someone I'm forgetting. Sorry, I want to order it by, price. So let's just go to 6.8 or below. McNeil, no one's going to buy him right now. Madueke from 12 onwards is probably not a bad option if he keeps starting, but I don't think he's better than Johnson. Semenyo, Rogers are both really good value picks, but if we're talking about who's going to get the most points, definitely Johnson. Obviously, if you want to go for Semenyo because he's $1 million cheaper and that allows you to make an upgrade somewhere else, by all means, right? Semenyo is a good option as well, but I don't think he's better than Johnson. Smith Rowe, Iwobi, Kovacic, Barnes doesn't always start. Kulusevski is not as good a pick as Johnson in my eyes. Rutter, maybe he's going to be great from Game Week 12 onwards, but what happens when João Pedro is back? I just don't think there's anyone better. And I'm going to have a look at the points predictions on Hub as well. If you want to check this stuff out, by the way, 7-day free trial, 30% off, link in the description below. I'm going to go to 6.7, which is his price and below, and I'm hoping Brendan Johnson at the top. Yeah, he is. And then Semenyo, of course, he's a great pick. And Garnacho, we're going to talk about in a minute. I think if you're thinking about it, 7 million or under, I would just ignore the Man City away fixture. You put Brennan Johnson in until he starts getting a reduction in minutes. Otherwise, you've got a very cheap midfielder and a very good attacking team with some pretty decent fixtures. He's just a good pick. So as I've just mentioned him, let's talk about Alejandro Garnacho next. Just over 65,000 transfers in this week, costing 6.3 million. So he is a bit cheaper than Johnson. But I stand by what I just said. If you've got 7 million or less to spend, I think you go for Johnson first, and Garnacho would have to be in addition to Johnson, not instead of, depending on how you've structured your squad. And it's not that I think Garnacho is a bad option, but I think, apart from the fact Spurs have got City away in 12, I can't really see any reason to pick Johnson instead. He's got the minutes right now. He's in a better team, a better attacking team as well. Garnacho has the fixtures in the short term, Leicester at home, Ipswich away and Everton at home. But then Man United have got to play Arsenal away in 14 and City away in 16. Even Forest at home in 15 is not an amazing fixture either. But my biggest concern, and maybe I'm being a little bit overly cautious with this, my main concern is Game Week 12, Amorim will be in charge. It's potential that they're going to move from a back 4 to a back 3, a 3-4-2-1. You can't be sure where Garnacho is going to play. Some people have mentioned that he could play wing back. He might play in the 2 behind the striker. But if that happens, you've also got Rashford there, and a lot of people think that Fernandes could also play in that front 3. So if it's Højlund as the number 9, you potentially got Fernandes, Garnacho and Rashford in the 2 behind, so 3 players for 2 spots. It might be that Fernandes plays further back. It might be that Amorim prefers Garnacho to Rashford, just like Ten Hag has done. And also, seemingly, what Ruud van Nistelrooy thinks as well, because Rashford is continuing to come off before Garnacho, but none of those things are a guarantee. And that just worries me a little bit. If you've got Garnacho, super easy hold. Leicester at home, Ipswich away, great. You just bank on Amorim keeping him in the team. I just don't think it's a guarantee. Or at least I would say this, right? Even if it's not a guarantee, I think it's far from a guarantee that he keeps playing 90 minutes every week. I will say this though, and I've said it since the start of the season, even when Amad Diallo was playing instead, I think Garnacho is Man United's best winger. And Rashford is great, and we know what he's capable of, but he hasn't been showing it for a little while now, and Garnacho continues to get chances. And I know he can be frustrating. We saw the game against Chelsea. He did waste a few attacks, few shots as well. There was one in particular from Bruno Fernandes that there was just no power behind it whatsoever, but he does get a lot of chances. 0.45 expected goals per 90 is very good. He's still young, he's ever improving, and he does already have, by the way, a few returns. So 3 goals first 10 game weeks, but he didn't start for 3 of those games. And last year it was 7 goals, 7 assists. So he will get you returns if he plays. I just don't know if you can be as confident in the minutes going forward as we have been recently. So 6.7 or less, I'm going Johnson. If you can only afford 6.3, then yes, I'd be tempted to take a punt on Garnacho. But even at that point, I think I would probably go Garnacho for the Man United factor, but I'd be tempted just to save 0.7 million and go for Semenyo instead. The Arsenal and City games are out of the way now, and obviously he scored against City anyway. The fixtures coming up for Brentford are pretty good for quite a while. Like all the way from 11 to, 20 maybe. I'm not saying every fixture in between is amazing. There ain't many there that would put you off. Like Man United away, Spurs at home are arguably the toughest games on paper. That's not a bad fixture run. So I think for value, Semenyo will probably trump Garnacho. I don't mind him as a punt. It's just the unknown. We're going to have this conversation for game week 11 and 12. How is Amorim going to set up? Who's he going to prefer? The honest answer is nobody knows. We have to wait until he takes charge of his first game, and then we can go from there. The problem is that first game is Ipswich away, and that's kind of where you want Man United players for if you're going to go for them. I don't mind Garnacho, but as you can tell, I'm not super enthused by it. So I want to talk about Alexander Isak next, who I briefly mentioned when I was talking about Ollie Watkins earlier. He's had just over 120,000 transfers in this week. At 8.3 million, he's not mega cheap, right? He's not like a Cunha, a Chris Wood, Raul Jimenez, etc. But he's not mega expensive either. And I think if you've got that kind of money to spend on a forward spot, and it doesn't massively impact what else you want to do in your team, I quite like him as a pick going forward. I think the fixtures are better than they look on paper for the next 6 game weeks. And he's a massive differential. Like his overall ownership is 13.8%, but I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that is dead teams. Because if you remember, Isak was super popular in pre-season. Newcastle had Southampton at home in game week 1. Lots of those people who've still got him will have stopped playing, right? And I suspect if I asked for people to send me their teams right now and I got 1,000 responses, most people will not have had Isak in game week 10. Of course, there's always going to be a few people, but I think with FPL managers that are still playing and heavily engaged, Isak's a huge differential. And I look at those fixtures. Again, I want to make it clear, I think Nottingham Forest are a really good team, and I can see why people have owned their defenders. I don't necessarily see a clean sheet there, because I think when you've got Isak, you've always got a chance of scoring, so I don't mind that fixture. West Ham at home looks amazing right now while Lopetegui is in charge. I've seen other people say this. It's basically David Moyes' team, apart from they're a lot less good defensively, although they weren't great under David Moyes in the last season or two either, but they're super open. Newcastle will get loads of chances. Palace away is nothing to be afraid of. Liverpool at home is not easy, right? Liverpool defence is looking great this year, but you're always going to get chances at St James's Park. Look what they did to Arsenal. They didn't create a huge amount of chances, but they got that one. Who was on the end of it? Isak. Brentford away is a good fixture, and Leicester at home is decent as well. So I think West Ham, Brentford, Leicester are all good. Palace away is nothing to be afraid of right now. and Forest where I think Newcastle can score. So I think it looks pretty good overall. He has to play 90 minutes basically every game at the moment because Wilson is not fit. And we don't know when he's going to be back. I think he's suffered another setback. He's on penalties for sure. He's just all-round FPL package that he offers is decent. And I'm not saying you should go and buy him over Acuna because it might be that, you know, if you buy Cunha or whoever it is you're looking at that's cheap, Chris Wood, that allows you to go and get Saka in a few weeks, whereas Isak would block you off. You've got to think about that. But if there's no issues with the money, I think he's a huge differential that has done well recently, by the way. Goal against Arsenal, goal against Chelsea. That's now 4 attack and returns this season. He has missed 2 games and got hooked at half-time as well against Wolves. Yeah, he's... I would say Isak has not delivered what we all expected in game week 1, but he is still fully capable of doing extremely well over the next 6 weeks. So big differential. I like him. I've got no plans to buy him because of how my squad is structured, but he's decent moving forward. So I've got one defender in this video, and that is Josko Gvardiol, who, like Chris Wood, just cannot stop scoring at the moment. And it's now 3 goals in his last 5 game weeks. So 1 against Newcastle away, another 1 against Wolves away, and then in the week just gone against Bournemouth away. And he also got Southampton at home clean sheet in game week 9 and 3 bonus points. So that was a 9-pointer. So over the last 5 game weeks, if I do the maths really quickly, it is 28, 35, 36 points. Really good return. And obviously if you can keep that up, he's well worth that 6.2 million price point. Do you need to rush out and buy Gvardiol? I would say probably not. You look at the next 3 game weeks, I'm not sure there's a clean sheet there for Man City. Brighton away, Spurs at home, Liverpool away. So then you're relying on those attack and returns. And right now, the level of returns look good like they did at the end of last season when people owned him. I'm not sure they're going to continue necessarily. 0.07 expected goals per 90. It's not terrible, but it's nothing to write home about for a defender. His actual goal is 0.32 per 90. So that will level out at some point. And then you've also got a lack of clean sheets over the next 3. If you already own Gvardiol, you're probably keeping him and just playing him every single game. I completely get that. But I'm not sure anyone should be looking to buy him right now. Pep did say yesterday in his press conference that Ake has still got a few problems. So he's not quite there, I don't think, to be playing week in, week out yet. Or at least not with midweek games as well. So I think Gvardiol's minutes are great. He obviously does have an eye for goal. And I'm not saying that he's going to stop scoring completely, right? But I think the level of goals will just come down. I just don't like the clean sheets over the next 3. From game week 14 onwards, I think Man City's fixtures get better. You got Forest at home, Palace away, Man United at home, Villa away, Everton at home, Leicester away, West Ham at home, Brentford away, Ipswich away, etc. That's a really good fixture run. I could be quite tempted to bring Gvardiol in, especially depending on what's happening with Ake at the time. And so I don't mind if you want to get him in now and just keep him for the long run, but I just don't see clean sheets over the next 3, and I'd rather just move somewhere else instead. The only difficult thing is, if you're looking to spend that kind of money, there's not really a massive amount of options. Like bringing in an Arsenal defender before Chelsea away is not great. I do think from 12 onwards they'll be good though. So maybe as a long-term move, that's not bad. Otherwise, you've got like Van Dijk for, what is he now, 6.1 or 6.2? Yeah, he's the same price as Gvardiol. Villa at home is okay, but I could see Villa scoring. Southampton away is good. Then you've got City at home, Newcastle away, Everton away, so it's a bit trickier. Like for Liverpool, I think 15, 16 onwards is probably when you really want them. And that's about the same time Gvardiol's fixtures get good as well. So I'm not against Gvardiol coming in for people this week, but I wouldn't expect clean sheets and those goals could dry up. Thank you very much for watching that video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on podcast, rate 5 stars as well. And if you haven't checked out Fantasy Football Hub, links in the description below. 7-day free trial at the moment to check out all their great tools and 30% off as well. I'll be back tomorrow for the game week preview, team selection on Thursday, final thoughts on Friday, and then deadline stream on Saturday. As always, thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you again soon.